Chapter 1, The Gathering Storm. The wind howled across the jagged cliffs of Kael'Vorne, the ancient stronghold that overlooked the churning seas below. Once, it had been the seat of kings, a place where rulers commanded vast armies and forged alliances that shaped the fate of nations. Now, it stood as a relic of a bygone era, its stone walls weathered and worn, but still defiant against the relentless march of time. In the great hall of Kael'Vorne, a fire crackled in the hearth, its flames casting flickering shadows on the cold, grey stone. The scent of burning wood mingled with the salt of the sea air that seeped through the cracks in the walls. The hall was vast, its ceiling lost in the gloom above, supported by pillars carved with the faces of long-forgotten heroes and gods. Tapestries, faded and tattered, clung to the walls, depicting scenes of battles, feasts, and betrayals, their colors muted by the passage of centuries. At the far end of the hall, seated upon a throne of black iron, was Lord Eamon Valewind, the last of his line. His hair, once a rich chestnut, had turned to silver, and deep lines etched his weathered face, marking the passage of years and the weight of burdens borne. He was clad in a robe of dark blue, trimmed with fur, the fabric heavy and lined with the crest of his house, a silver falcon in flight against a stormy sky. In his hand, he held a goblet of wine, though he had yet to drink from it. The Lord's eyes, a piercing grey that mirrored the stormy skies outside, were fixed on the man standing before him. The visitor was tall, with a lean, wiry build, his face obscured by the hood of his cloak. His voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it carried a weight that belied his unassuming appearance. "They gather in the east, my lord," the man said, his tone devoid of emotion. "The banners of the fallen houses are raised once more. The time of reckoning is upon us." Lord Eamon's grip tightened on the goblet, his knuckles whitening. "And what of the others?" he asked, his voice gravelly with age. "Do they still hold to their oaths?" The hooded man hesitated, then shook his head. "Many have forsaken their vows. The old alliances crumble like dust in the wind. Only those who still remember the old ways remain true." A heavy silence settled over the hall, broken only by the distant roar of the sea and the crackling of the fire. Lord Eamon took a slow breath, his gaze drifting to the flickering flames. "War is coming," he said softly, more to himself than to the messenger. "A war like none we have seen in our lifetimes." The hooded man inclined his head. "It is inevitable, my lord. The shadows lengthen, and with them, the darkness grows." Lord Eamon nodded slowly, his mind already racing ahead to the battles to come, the alliances to forge, and the enemies to crush. But beneath the calm exterior, a storm brewed within him, a storm of fear, uncertainty, and a flicker of hope. "Send word to the lords of the northern reaches," he ordered, his voice firm. "Tell them to prepare their armies. The time has come to stand together, or fall alone." The hooded man bowed low and retreated into the shadows, leaving Lord Eamon alone with his thoughts. The old lord stared into the fire, watching as the flames danced and twisted, lost in the memories of battles long past and the looming spectre of those yet to come. As the echoes of the messenger's departure faded into the shadows, Lord Eamon remained seated on his iron throne, his thoughts swirling like the storm clouds gathering outside. The threat of war was no stranger to him, he had lived through more than his share of conflicts, both great and small. But this felt different. There was a weight to the air, a sense of impending doom that hung over Kael'Vorne like a shroud. He could feel it in his bones, in the way the wind seemed to carry whispers of ancient prophecies long forgotten. The old ways, the old gods, these were not mere legends to be dismissed. They were truths, buried beneath the sands of time, waiting to be unearthed by those who still believed. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hall, and Eamon looked up to see a young woman approaching. She was tall and slender, with a regal bearing that belied her youth. Her hair was a deep raven black, cascading down her back in loose waves, and her eyes were the same stormy grey as Eamon's, eyes that could pierce the hearts of men and see the truth buried within. "Father," she said, her voice soft yet firm as she drew near. "I heard the news. Is it true?" Eamon nodded, his gaze lingering on his daughter's face. Lyra Valewind was his only child, the last of the Valewind bloodline, and the one he had raised to be as strong and cunning as any son. She had been his advisor, his confidant, and his fiercest defender, even as the world around them grew darker and more treacherous. "It is true," he replied, his voice heavy with the weight of the truth. "The banners of the fallen houses rise once more. The old alliances crumble, and the time of reckoning is upon us." Lyra's eyes narrowed, a flash of determination igniting within them. "We must act quickly, then. We cannot wait for the storm to come to us, we must face it head-on." Eamon could not help but smile at his daughter's resolve. She had always been like this, ever since she was a child, a force of nature, unyielding in the face of adversity. It was a trait that had served her well, and one that Eamon had come to rely on in these uncertain times. "You are right," he said, rising from his throne. The weight of his years seemed to fall away as he stood tall, the firelight casting long shadows across his face. "We must be the ones to decide our fate, not wait for others to do it for us." Lyra stepped closer, her expression softening as she placed a hand on her father's arm. "We will face this together, as we always have. But you must know, father, there are those who will not stand with us. We must be prepared for the possibility that we will stand alone." Eamon nodded, the truth of her words sinking in. They had faced betrayal before, from those who had once sworn loyalty to the Valewind name. But this time, the stakes were higher, and the consequences of failure far more dire. "We will do what we must," he said, his voice resolute. "Even if it means standing alone." Lyra gave a nod, her grip tightening on his arm. "Then we should call the council. The lords of the north must know where we stand, and they must choose their sides." Eamon agreed, and together they left the great hall, their footsteps echoing through the corridors of Kael'Vorne. As they walked, Aemon's mind raced with the decisions that lay ahead. There were allies to call upon, enemies to reckon with, and secrets to be unearthed. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear, they would not face it alone. They reached the council chamber, a smaller, more intimate room adorned with maps of the known world and the banners of the northern houses. The air was thick with anticipation as the lords and ladies of the north gathered around the large, circular table at the center of the room. Lord Arik Stormborn, a grizzled warrior with a scar running down the length of his face, was the first to speak. "Lord Valewind, what news do you bring? We've heard whispers of unrest, but nothing concrete." Eamon took his seat at the head of the table, with Lyra standing at his side. He met the eyes of each lord and lady present, reading the unease and uncertainty in their expressions. "The rumors are true," Eamon began, his voice steady and commanding. "War is coming. The banners of the fallen houses have been raised, and the old alliances are crumbling. We must prepare for what lies ahead, or risk being swept away in the storm." The lords exchanged uneasy glances, and Lady Sienna of House Ravenshaw, a woman with sharp features and an even sharper mind, leaned forward. "And what of the others? The southern lords, the eastern kingdoms, will they stand with us?" Lyra answered before her father could, her voice calm but resolute. "The south is divided, as always. They squabble over petty grievances while the real threat looms. As for the East, we have heard little, but they are more concerned with their own affairs than with the troubles of the North." Lord Arik scowled. "So, we are to face this alone? Against a united enemy?" Eamon shook his head. "Not alone. There are still those who remember the old ways, who will stand with us when the time comes. But we must be the ones to lead. We must be the beacon that others rally to." Lady Sienna narrowed her eyes. "And what of those who refuse to join us? What of the houses that turn their backs on us?" Lyra's gaze hardened. "They will be dealt with, as all traitors are." A heavy silence fell over the room as the weight of her words settled on the lords and ladies. They knew what was at stake, and they knew the price of failure. But there was no turning back now. The die had been cast, and the path ahead was clear. "We will stand with you, Lord Valewind," Lord Arik finally said, his voice resolute. "The North will not be divided." The others echoed his sentiment, one by one pledging their loyalty to House Valewind and the cause that lay before them. Eamon felt a surge of pride and determination as he looked at the faces of those who would fight beside him. "Then it is settled," he said, rising to his feet. "We will prepare for war. Send word to your bannermen, gather your forces, and fortify your lands. The storm is coming, and we will meet it with steel in hand." As the council dispersed, Eamon and Lyra lingered in the chamber, their thoughts heavy with the knowledge of what was to come. The road ahead would be long and fraught with danger, but they would face it together, as they always had. Outside, the wind continued to howl, and the first drops of rain began to fall, as if the heavens themselves were weeping for the blood that would soon be shed. But in the heart of Kael'Vorne, a fire burned bright, a fire that would not be extinguished, no matter how fierce the storm.